To save the giant Apache sister from a forced marriage, the poor rancher offered a fake one. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The sun hung low over the western plains, casting a golden glow over the vast, dry landscape. Among the scattered ranches and the endless expanse of dusty fields, one small farm stood in isolation. It was here that we meet Sam, a poor rancher who lived alone, far from the bustling towns and their intrigues. For years, Sam had lived a life of quiet solitude. His days were spent tending to his cattle, fixing fences, and battling the harsh elements of the unforgiving wilderness. He had once been part of a bustling family ranch, but after the tragic deaths of his parents, Sam chose to withdraw from society, burying his pain in the chores of daily life. His isolation gave him peace, but it also left him vulnerable to the decisions of those with more power. One evening, as Sam worked late into the night under the fading light of the setting sun, a rider appeared on the horizon. At first, he thought it was just another traveler passing through. But as the figure drew closer, Sam recognized the dark silhouette, a tall man on a horse, dressed in fine clothes. The rider approached, his horse kicking up dust with each step. As he neared, Sam could see the man's stern face and his cold eyes, the kind that seemed to look straight through a person. "You Sam McCullough?" the man asked gruffly, pulling his horse to a halt. Sam nodded, not quite sure what to expect. The man dismounted and stepped forward, holding a letter in his hand. "I'm here on business," he said. "The Apache tribe has a daughter, a giant woman, and she's been promised to a wealthy man. But she refuses. She's causing a lot of trouble. The chief needs someone to handle it. You're to go to her, and if she won't comply, bring her back by any means necessary." Sam stood frozen, his mind racing. He had heard of the Apache tribe, of course, and their fierce warriors. But a giant Apache woman? This was more than he could have imagined. The man handed Sam the letter, and Sam could feel the weight of it, heavy with authority. He read the contents quickly, the words urging him to act swiftly, to capture the woman and return her to the tribe's leader. But Sam wasn't the kind of man who took orders from others, especially not when it came to something as serious as this. The woman in question, a fierce and powerful Apache warrior, was said to be as tall as a mountain, a woman who had fought alongside her people in countless battles. And yet here was this man, asking Sam to trap her like some wild animal. Sam thought about it for a moment, weighing the options. He had no love for the rich or for the chiefs of tribes, but he knew this could mean trouble. It could mean a war he wasn't prepared for. Still, there was something about the situation that gnawed at him, something that made him think this wasn't just a simple job. "I don't want any part of this," Sam finally said, his voice firm. "I'm just a rancher. I don't get involved in tribal matters." The man's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, Sam felt a shiver run down his spine. "You'll be involved whether you like it or not," the man said. "The chief doesn't take kindly to disobedience." As the man turned to leave, Sam's mind raced. This wasn't just about cattle or land anymore. This was something much bigger. And whether he liked it or not, he knew he had to make a choice, one that could change his life forever. Sam stood alone in the fading light, the weight of the decision settling in his chest. The man had left, but the words echoed in Sam's ears. He had been thrust into something he hadn't asked for, but now he had to decide. Would he help capture the woman, or would he find a way to stop the forced marriage and face whatever consequences might follow? Sam spent the rest of the evening contemplating the strange encounter. The weight of the decision sat heavily on his shoulders, and as the sky darkened, he realized he couldn't just let it go. His life, as solitary as it had been, suddenly felt at risk. He wasn't a man to be controlled, but he also knew that refusing this request could bring consequences he wasn't prepared to face. The thought of getting involved in something so dangerous made him uneasy, but there was another part of him, a part he'd buried deep, that could not stand by while someone, especially a woman, was treated unfairly. His mind turned to the image of the Apache woman, strong and defiant, forced into a marriage she didn't want. Sam had heard rumors about her, the stories of how she had fought off entire groups of soldiers in battle. Her strength was legendary, and yet, there she was, being forced into a situation she had no say in. The idea didn't sit right with him. The next morning, Sam gathered his things. He saddled his horse, packed his rifle, and set off toward the nearby town where he'd heard the Apache woman was being held. The journey took several hours, the sun beating down relentlessly on the open plains. Sam's thoughts kept returning to the same question. What could he possibly do to help her? As he neared the town, the distant silhouette of a building came into view. It was a small, rundown structure, surrounded by a few other buildings that looked like they had been hastily thrown together. The area was a crossroads for travelers, where traders and other settlers passed through regularly. Sam approached cautiously, not wanting to draw attention to himself. He didn't know what he was walking into, but he was certain he wouldn't get involved in anything more than he had to. When he finally reached the outskirts of the town, he saw her. The Apache woman, standing tall despite her chains, her eyes filled with defiance and determination. Sam's heart raced as he dismounted and approached. She was even more formidable than the stories had described, her broad shoulders and powerful frame a stark contrast to the vulnerability in her eyes. She stood there, a silent symbol of resistance, waiting for whatever was to come next. As Sam approached, the guards at the entrance of the makeshift holding area noticed him. One of them, a burly man with a thick mustache, gave Sam a hard look. "What do you want?" the guard asked, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Sam stood tall and squared his shoulders. "I'm here to speak with the woman. I have something to discuss with her." The guard snorted, clearly uninterested. "She's not talking to anyone. She's to be delivered to the chief's son tomorrow. That's the end of it." Sam's mind raced. He had no plan, no idea what he was supposed to do now that he was face to face with the woman he was meant to help. But one thing was certain, he wasn't leaving without her. "I don't care what you say. I'm speaking with her." The guard's hand tightened on his sword, but before he could respond, the Apache woman stepped forward. Her gaze met Sam's, and for a brief moment, it felt as though the whole world had stopped. "You're the one they sent?" she asked, her voice low but firm. Sam nodded. "I'm here to help you." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. Then, she spoke again. "I don't need help. What I need is freedom." Sam felt a pang of guilt. He had no idea how to offer her that. The guards, however, didn't seem to share her determination. They circled the area, keeping a watchful eye on the exchange. "You can't be here," one of the other guards said, moving closer. "This is official business. You'll be leaving now." Sam turned to face the guard. "Not until I speak with her." The tension in the air thickened, and Sam could feel the weight of the moment hanging over them. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the Apache woman spoke again, her voice steady. "You came for me, but there's no way out. Not now, not without a fight." Sam's heart raced as he processed her words. He knew that the next move would determine everything. There was no going back, no escaping what had already been set in motion. Sam turned back to the guards, who were now closing in on him. He could feel his pulse quicken, the tension building with each passing second. The moment had arrived. Would he stay and fight for this woman's freedom, or would he turn away and walk into the life he had left behind? Sam stood his ground, heart pounding, as the guards moved. In closer, their hands hovering over their weapons. The Apache woman, tall and powerful, was still standing by his side, her eyes scanning the situation, calculating the next move. Sam knew he had to act fast. His eyes flickered to the guards, then back to her. She was ready to fight, ready to break free from the chains that held her, but Sam wasn't sure if he could protect her from the men surrounding them. "We don't have much time," Sam muttered under his breath. "I need you to trust me." The Apache woman's gaze softened, but there was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet strength that made Sam respect her even more. "I trust you as much as I trust anyone," she replied, her voice low and steady. "But we need more than trust to get out of here." Sam nodded grimly. He had no plan, but he wasn't about to walk away now. The guards closed in, their eyes narrowing. "You'll regret this," one of them warned, stepping forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Sam didn't respond. His hand instinctively reached for his rifle, but he knew the fight wouldn't be easy. A loud shout from the edge of the camp caught everyone's attention, momentarily distracting the guards. "What's this?" a new voice called out, deep and commanding. The men immediately stopped in their tracks, their heads turning toward the source of the voice. Sam saw a tall figure riding toward them on horseback, a man dressed in dark, worn clothing, his face partially obscured by the shadows of his wide-brimmed hat. The new arrival was older than the other men, his posture proud and authoritative. "What's going on here?" the man asked, his tone commanding. The guards hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. One of them stepped forward and spoke quickly. "This man is interfering with the Apache woman's transfer. We've been ordered to take her to the chief's son." The man on horseback studied the situation for a long moment, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. "And who gave you that order?" he asked, his voice cold. The guard stammered, clearly unsure of how to respond. It came from the chief's men." The man on horseback narrowed his eyes. "I see." He turned to Sam, who was still standing at the ready, his rifle now in his hands. "I'm guessing you're the one who's been trying to get this woman free." Sam didn't lower his rifle. "I am, and I'll keep trying." The man gave a slight nod, then looked back at the guards. "It seems you've been misinformed." He dismounted and walked toward them, his movements slow and deliberate. The guards backed up a step, clearly intimidated by his presence. "I'm in charge of this operation now," the man declared. "You can all go back to your posts. I'll take care of things from here." For a moment, it felt like everything had frozen in time. The guards stood still, not knowing how to react to this sudden shift in authority. The man turned to Sam and gave him a nod of acknowledgement. "You're not alone in this. Let's get her out of here." Sam felt a rush of relief and disbelief at the same time. This stranger, this man who had just arrived, was offering to help. Without a word, he followed the man toward the Apache woman, who was still watching them with cautious eyes. "What happens now?" Sam asked as he walked alongside the man. The stranger glanced at him. "We get her away from here. I have a place where we can hide out for a while." Sam looked at him, trying to read his intentions, but there was no time to question. "How do you know about this?" Sam asked. "I've been following the trail for some time," the man replied, his voice low. "I knew something like this was coming. We can't let her go through with it." Sam nodded, understanding that there was more to this situation than met the eye. The man was involved in something larger, something more dangerous, but Sam didn't care. He had one goal in mind, to help the Apache woman escape. They reached her side, and Sam extended his hand. "Come on," he said softly. The Apache woman hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand in his, her grip firm and resolute. Together, they moved toward the edge of the camp, their steps quick and silent. The man led the way, his pace steady and sure. Sam kept his eyes on the guards, waiting for any sign that they would come after them. But none came. The sound of hooves echoed in the distance as they made their way through the trees, and Sam felt a surge of hope for the first time since he had arrived. They were getting away, but Sam knew that this was just the beginning. The real challenge would come later, when they had to face the full force of the tribe and the powerful men who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. But for now, they had a chance to escape, to fight for something better. And Sam wasn't about to let that slip away. The air was thick with tension as Sam, the Apache woman, and the man on horseback moved swiftly through the dense trees. They kept their movements quiet and fast, staying low to avoid being spotted. Sam's heart raced, his eyes constantly scanning the area behind them, aware that every second they spent out in the open increased their risk of being discovered. The man leading them, who had introduced himself as Caleb Thornfield, was a rugged figure with a commanding presence. His experience in these situations was clear from the way he moved, his calm demeanor in the midst of the chaos, and his quick thinking. "How far are we going?" Sam asked, trying to catch his breath. Caleb glanced back over his shoulder. "Not far. We've got a place near the river. We'll be safe there for a while." Sam nodded, trusting him, but still unsure of the situation. Who was Caleb really? And why was he helping them? They had only just met, and yet, here he was, risking his life to help an Apache woman he didn't know. The Apache woman, who had introduced herself as Ayana, walked beside Sam, her pace steady despite the heavy chains still around her wrists. Sam noticed that her eyes, though filled with gratitude for Caleb's intervention, were also full of determination. She wasn't one to accept help passively. There was a fire in her spirit that Sam respected. After what felt like hours, they reached a small, secluded cabin near the river. The structure was simple, but it had the feeling of safety, hidden away from the prying eyes of those who might be looking for them. Caleb opened the door and ushered them inside. The interior was sparse, but practical, enough to provide shelter and rest. As soon as they were inside, Caleb began securing the door. "We'll stay here for the night. In the morning, we'll figure out our next move," he said, his voice low but firm. Ayana and Sam both nodded, but the weight of their situation still hung heavy in the air. Ayana looked out the small window at the moon rising above the river, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. Sam could sense her unease. She had been taken from her people, forced into a situation where her very identity was a threat to those in power. Sam couldn't imagine what that must feel like. "Do you think they'll come looking for us?" Sam asked Caleb, breaking the silence. Caleb glanced at Ayana before answering. "Oh, they'll come. No doubt about it. But we'll be ready." He paused for a moment, his face shadowed by something darker. "This isn't just about you, Ayana. They're after something bigger. Something that could change everything." Ayana looked at Caleb, her expression hardening. "What do you mean?" Caleb sighed and sat down at the table, motioning for them to sit. "There's a reason they want you so badly. Your people, my people, are all caught in the middle of something much larger. They're using you to send a message. But if we play this right, we can turn the tables." Sam exchanged a glance with Ayana. Neither of them had expected this. This was no longer just a rescue mission. This was about survival, on a much grander scale. "So what's the plan?" Sam asked, sitting down beside Ayana. Caleb leaned forward, his hands folded together. "First, we stay hidden here. For now, we don't make any noise. But after that, we need to gather allies. People who care more about justice than power. There are others out there who want to see the people in charge fall." Ayana's eyes narrowed as she listened. "And what do you expect me to do? I can't just sit here while my people are being threatened." Caleb smiled slightly. "You won't have to. We're going to use everything they've underestimated about you. Your strength, your courage. The fact that they think you're just a woman they can control. We're going to make them regret that." Ayana stood up, her chains rattling as she moved. "I don't need anyone's help, but I'll take what I can get." Sam could see the fire in her eyes. She wasn't just going to sit back and wait for someone to come and save her. She was going to fight, and Sam admired that about her. But he also knew they couldn't do this alone. They needed more than just the two of them. They needed a plan. As night fell, the three of them sat in the small cabin, the weight of the situation settling over them. The world outside was quiet, but Sam knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The forces hunting them would be relentless. And with every passing hour, the stakes grew higher. "Tomorrow we move," Caleb said, breaking the silence. "We start gathering the pieces. It's going to be dangerous, but we don't have a choice." Sam looked at Ayana. She was ready. She had to be. Because the fight was just beginning, and the only way out now was to face it head on. The next morning, the cabin was quiet, the sound of the river outside a constant hum in the background. Sam, Ayana, and Caleb had spent the night in tense silence, each of them knowing the day ahead would be pivotal. They had their plan, but plans were always at risk in a world like this, especially when dealing with powerful enemies. Caleb was the first to move, gathering his things and checking the surroundings for any signs of pursuit. He had been tracking the situation for some time, but he knew that if they stayed in one place too long, it was only a matter of time before the chief's men found them. "It's time to move," Caleb said, his voice calm but firm, as if the decision had already been made for him. Sam nodded, his nerves buzzing with anticipation. He had never been involved in something so dangerous, but now that he was in it, there was no turning back. Ayana stood up from the corner of the room, her chains still clinking with each movement. She had been quiet for the past hour, lost in thought, but now her eyes were sharp, focused. "Where are we going?" she asked. Caleb's gaze met hers, and for a moment, there was an unspoken understanding between them. "We're going to meet someone who can help us," Caleb said. "But it won't be easy. They've got eyes everywhere." Sam looked at Ayana, who nodded in agreement, her expression resolute. They weren't going to back down. "Not now. Let's go," she said. The three of them left the cabin and headed toward the edge of the river, where Caleb had arranged for a boat to take them across. The morning mist hung low over the water, shrouding their movements in a veil of secrecy. As they rowed across the river, Sam's mind raced with questions. Who was this person Caleb spoke of? How could they possibly hope to fight against the chief's men, who had the resources to hunt them down? The river was calm, the only sounds being the soft splash of the oars and the occasional call of a bird in the distance. But the peace was deceptive. Sam knew that at any moment, they could be discovered. After a tense hour, they arrived on the other side of the river. Caleb led them through a dense thicket, his movements confident, as if he knew this land like the back of his hand. The forest opened up to reveal a small clearing, where an old cabin stood. It looked abandoned, its windows boarded up, the wood of the structure weathered by time. Caleb knocked twice on the door, and after a moment, it creaked open, revealing a man in his late 40s, wearing a tattered coat and a weathered hat. His eyes were sharp, and he carried the air of someone who had seen far too much. "You're late," the man said, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. Caleb gave a slight nod. "I had to make sure we weren't followed." The man looked over at Sam and Ayana, his gaze lingering on her for a moment. "The giant Apache," he muttered under his breath. "I thought she was a myth." Ayana stiffened but said nothing. Sam could sense the tension in the air. The man stepped aside, gesturing for them to come in. "I've got a place for you to rest," he said. "But we need to move fast. The chief's men will be looking for you, and they don't take kindly to anyone who gets in their way." Inside the cabin was simple, but it had the feel of a hideout. A small fire crackled in the hearth, and a few wooden crates were stacked against the walls. The man, who introduced himself as Elias, offered them water and some dry bread. "You're not the first people the chief has tried to control," Elias said as they ate. "But you might be the last if we do this." "Right." He glanced at Ayana. "You're the key to everything. If we can get to the heart of what they're really after, we can stop them. But it's going to take more than just hiding." Ayana looked at him, her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean by that?" Elias sighed, rubbing his forehead. "They're after power, and you're part of that power. Your blood, your lineage, there's something they don't want getting out." Sam could feel the weight of the situation settling heavily on his chest. They weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting for something far more dangerous, secrets that could change everything. "We need to move quickly," Caleb said, his tone urgent. "They won't stop until they get what they want." Elias stood up and moved toward the back of the cabin. "Then it's time we make sure they don't get it." With that, he opened a hidden trap door in the floor and disappeared below. Sam and Ayana exchanged a glance before following him down into the darkness. The air down there was cool and smelled of earth and old wood. Elias lit a lantern and motioned for them to follow. "This is where the real work begins," he said. Sam's mind raced as they descended deeper into the earth, knowing that the path they were about to take would lead them into uncharted territory. Whatever happened next, there would be no turning back. The air in the underground passage was damp and heavy, the flickering light from the lantern casting long shadows on the walls as Sam, Ayana, and Caleb descended further into the depths of the cabin. The smell of earth and musty wood filled the air, and Sam could hear the soft echo of their footsteps as they walked deeper into what felt like a hidden world. Elias, who had led the way, seemed at home in this underground space, his movements confident and purposeful. He turned to them as they reached a small room, the walls lined with old crates and barrels. "This is where we hide," Elias said, his voice low. "For now, at least. But we need to move fast." Sam felt the weight of those words sink in. They were no longer just escaping a few guards or a few bad men. They were now involved in something much larger, something that could change the course of everything. "What exactly is it they want from her?" Sam asked, glancing at Ayana. Elias paused for a moment, as if weighing how much to say. "It's not just her," he said finally. "It's her bloodline, her family. There are secrets in the Apache tribes, old powers that some would kill for. The chief's men aren't just trying to control her. They're after something far darker." Sam looked at Ayana, whose face was a mask of determination. "You knew this, didn't you?" he asked. Ayana nodded, her expression unreadable. "I suspected it, but I didn't know for sure until now." Elias gave them a moment before speaking again. "They'll stop at nothing to get their hands on those secrets. But we can't let that happen." "How do we stop them?" Sam asked. Elias's eyes hardened. "First, we need to find out who's really pulling the strings. The chief's men are just pawns. The real power is coming from somewhere else, and we need to cut it off before it's too late. Ayana stepped forward, her gaze intense. So we take down the chief. Elias shook his head. It's not that simple. The chief has allies, powerful ones. You can't just fight your way through this. He paused, glancing at Sam. But you can try. Caleb, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I've got contacts. People who owe me favors. We'll need all the help we can get. Sam felt a surge of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. We'll do whatever it takes, Sam said, the resolve in his voice surprising even him. Ayana nodded. We fight for the truth. Elias looked between the two of them. Then it settled. We wait until nightfall, then we move. As the hours passed, the tension in the underground room grew thicker. Sam could feel the weight of what they were about to do, the stakes higher than anything he had ever faced. He wasn't just trying to save a woman from an unwanted marriage anymore. He was fighting to stop a powerful force from seizing something that could destroy everything. By the time night had fully fallen, they were ready. They packed what little gear they had and made their way out of the underground room. The cold air outside was a sharp contrast to the warmth of the cabin, and Sam felt his senses heighten as they made their way toward their next destination. Caleb led the way, moving quickly and quietly through the dense woods. Sam and Ayana followed, keeping close to the shadows, their every step careful. They made their way to a small clearing where Caleb had arranged a meeting with his contacts. As they arrived, Sam could see the outlines of several figures gathered around a campfire. Caleb stepped forward, and the figures immediately rose to greet him. You've brought them, one of the men said, his voice gruff. Caleb nodded. These are the people who are going to help us take down the chief. We don't have much time. The man nodded, his expression serious. Then let's get to work. The group gathered around, and Elias began explaining the plan. They would strike at the heart of the chief's operations, using their combined forces to take down his allies and cut off their supply lines. It was risky, but it was the only way to stop them. As the plan took shape, Sam felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just about saving Ayana anymore. This was about saving everything that mattered. They spent the rest of the night preparing, making sure they had everything they needed for the mission. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, they were ready. Sam, Ayana, and Caleb stood together, their faces grim but determined. They were about to walk into the unknown, but they had no choice. The future of their people depended on them. We do this together, Caleb said, his voice steady. No one left behind. Sam looked at Ayana, her fierce expression matching his own. Together, she agreed. With that, they moved forward, their footsteps in unison as they prepared to face the battle that would change everything. The forest was eerily quiet as the group moved forward, each step calculated, every rustle of leaves potentially signaling danger. Sam's heart raced, the weight of the plan settling heavily on his chest. The mission ahead was a risky one, and there was no guarantee they would succeed, but they had no choice. As they neared the chief's stronghold, Caleb motioned for the group to stop. The campfire from the previous night had long since burned out, and the first light of dawn was creeping up behind the mountains. Caleb turned to them, his face set in a determined expression. We're close now, he whispered, but we'll need to be quick. The chief's men are likely patrolling this area. Sam and Ayana nodded, their faces hardening with resolve. They had come this far, and they weren't turning back. The next few moments were critical. As the group moved silently through the trees, Sam could feel his senses heightened. His mind replayed the plan over and over in his head. They would break into the stronghold and disable the chief's communication lines, making it impossible for him to call for reinforcements. The goal was to disrupt his control, to create enough chaos that they could get Ayana to safety and remove the threat. Sam stole a glance at Ayana. Her expression was calm, but there was something else there, something fierce, something that burned in her eyes. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her people, for her freedom. As they reached the edge of the stronghold, Caleb motioned for everyone to crouch low. The area ahead was heavily guarded, with watchmen patrolling in regular intervals. Sam scanned the surroundings, calculating their next move. They would need to split up, create distractions, and confuse the guards. We move on my signal, Caleb whispered. The tension in the air was thick as they waited. Sam's breath slowed, and his hand tightened around his rifle. They had practiced their plan over the last few days, but nothing could prepare them for the real thing. The stakes were too high. Now, Caleb hissed. In an instant, the group was on the move. Sam dashed forward, his boots barely making a sound on the ground, Ayana close behind him. The guards didn't see them coming. Sam's pulse raced as they made their way toward the main entrance of the stronghold, staying in the shadows to avoid detection. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They had no time to waste. As they reached the first guard post, Caleb signaled for them to stop. Sam crouched low behind a large rock, his eyes scanning the area. He could see two guards ahead, standing just a few yards away, talking in low voices. Caleb had said the plan would depend on creating chaos, but Sam wasn't sure how long they could hold out. "We have to make this quick," Sam muttered under his breath. Ayana nodded, her jaw set. In determination. With a quick, fluid motion, Sam grabbed a small rock and hurled it toward a distant tree. The noise caused the guards to glance around in confusion, just long enough for the team to move closer. As soon as the guards' attention shifted, Sam darted forward, his body low and silent. Ayana was right behind him. Together, they crept toward the entrance, their footsteps quiet against the dirt. Just as they reached the door, the sound of a bell rang out in the distance. Sam's heart skipped a beat. Someone had triggered the alarm. "Move," Caleb hissed from the shadows. The sound of boots hitting the ground echoed through the clearing as the group rushed toward the heart of the stronghold. The door was heavy, but it gave way with a loud creak. Sam winced, but there was no turning back now. Inside, the air was thick with tension. The stronghold was a fortress, and they could feel the eyes of the chief's men on them, watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. Sam's mind raced as they moved quickly through the hallways. They had to find the central command room. Once they disabled the communication lines, they could create the distraction they needed. The halls were dark, lit only by a few dim torches on the walls. The quiet was unsettling. Every step they took felt like it could be their last. As they rounded a corner, a voice called out from the end of the hallway. "Stop right there." Sam froze. His heart slammed in his chest as he turned to see a guard at the far end of the corridor, a sword drawn and ready. "We've been spotted," Sam muttered, his mind racing for a solution. "Get ready." With a swift motion, he pulled his rifle from its sling, aiming it at the guard. The tension in the air was palpable. For a moment, no one moved. Then, in an instant, Caleb lunged forward, tackling the guard to the ground. The two struggled for a few moments before Caleb's knife flashed in the dim light. With one clean movement, he silenced the guard. Sam and Ayana stood still, watching the scene unfold. It was clear that the battle was about to get much harder. But there was no turning back. They had to finish what they started. The sound of footsteps echoed in the dim corridor, the tension rising with each passing moment. Sam, Ayana, and Caleb moved swiftly through the hall, the weight of the mission pressing down on them. The guard had been dealt with, but the clock was ticking, and every second brought them closer to discovery. They could hear voices ahead, the soft murmur of conversation in the rooms beyond. Caleb held up a hand, signaling for the group to stop. He motioned for Sam and Ayana to crouch low against the wall as he peeked around the corner. The hallway was clear for now, but they knew that wouldn't last long. "We're getting close," Caleb whispered, his voice tight with urgency. "The command room should be just ahead. Once we're inside, we disable their communications, and we can make our move." Sam nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced over at Ayana, whose expression was unreadable. Her strength was evident, but Sam could see the strain in her eyes. They had been through so much already, and yet, the real battle was only just beginning. They couldn't afford to falter now. Caleb moved forward, his steps silent, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Sam and Ayana followed closely behind, their breath shallow, each step more calculated than the last. As they rounded the corner, they saw the door to the command room. It was guarded, just as Caleb had predicted. Two men stood watch, their backs turned to the approaching group. "We take them out quietly," Caleb muttered. "Sam, Ayana, stay low." Without a sound, Caleb crept forward, his movements fluid and quick. Sam could barely hear his footsteps over the pounding in his chest, but he trusted Caleb completely. They were running out of time, and they couldn't afford to make a mistake. In one swift motion, Caleb lunged at the first guard, knocking him unconscious with a blow to the back of the head. The second guard spun around, drawing his weapon, but Sam was already on him. With a swift motion, Sam tackled the man to the ground, disarming him in an instant. The guard struggled briefly, but Sam was too strong. He held him down until the fight went out of him. "Clear," Sam said, his voice low. Caleb nodded, moving quickly to the door. He took a deep breath and, with a swift movement, unlocked it. The door creaked open, revealing a room filled with maps, papers, and a few men working at desks. The room was smaller than Sam had expected, but it was heavily fortified. Caleb stepped inside first, followed by Sam and Ayana. The men inside looked up in surprise, but there was no time for words. Caleb acted fast, moving to the desk where the communication equipment was set up. He quickly began working, disconnecting wires and smashing devices to prevent them from calling for reinforcements. Sam stood guard by the door, his eyes scanning the hallway for any sign of trouble. Ayana moved silently across the room, her eyes darting from one corner to the next, always alert. The men inside the room were starting to recover from the shock, but by the time they could react, it was already too late. Caleb had disabled their communication lines, and the room was now useless to the enemy. Sam's pulse raced as the reality of their success sank in. They had just taken a major step toward winning this fight, but it wasn't over. They needed to get out before reinforcements arrived. "We need to go," Caleb said, his voice steady. Now, they made their way back down the hallway, retracing their steps, the adrenaline pumping through their veins. As they neared the exit, the sound of footsteps reached their ears. Sam's heart skipped a beat. "They're coming," he whispered. Caleb gave a quick nod. "Stay close and stay quiet." They ducked into a small alcove, holding their breath as the guards passed by. Sam could hear the pounding of their boots on the floor, the sound of their voices growing fainter as they moved down the corridor. Sam exhaled slowly, the tension leaving his body. They had made it this far, but the real test was still ahead. They had to make it out of the stronghold and back to safety. As they continued their escape, they encountered no more guards. It was almost too quiet, but Sam knew better than to let his guard down. The stronghold had been a fortress, but now, it felt like it was crumbling around them. They finally reached the exit, and as Caleb opened the door, the cool night air greeted them. They were free, but only for a moment. Sam knew this wasn't the end of the battle. It was just the beginning of a new war. The chief wouldn't let this go. They were not out of danger yet. But for now, they had won. They had disrupted the enemy's plans, and for the first time, it felt like they had a fighting chance. The cold night air hit them as they stepped out of the stronghold, the sound of their hurried footsteps the only noise in the otherwise silent landscape. Sam, Ayana, and Caleb moved quickly, their eyes constantly scanning for any signs of pursuit. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape was slowly fading, replaced by the weight of the consequences that awaited them. They had made it out, but the battle wasn't over. The chief's men would be relentless in their pursuit, and Sam knew that their actions would have far-reaching effects. As they made their way deeper into the forest, Caleb spoke, his voice low and serious. "We're not safe yet. They'll be looking for us, and they won't stop until they find us." Sam nodded, his thoughts racing. The plan had worked, but they were far from being out of danger. Every step they took felt like they were moving further into enemy territory, but it also felt like they were getting closer to their goal. Ayana, walking beside Sam, was quiet, her face set in determination. She had been through so much already, but Sam could see the fire in her eyes. This was her fight now, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. "What's the next step?" Sam asked, glancing at Caleb. Caleb looked at him, his expression grim. "We need to find allies. People who can help us take down the chief and his men once and for all. The information we got from the stronghold is just the beginning. We need to know who's really pulling the strings." Sam could sense the urgency in Caleb's voice. They couldn't afford to waste time. Every moment was a risk. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a pale light over the forest as they continued on their way. They walked in silence for a while, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was as though the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing. Caleb stopped and turned to them. "This is where we part ways," he said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of the situation. "I know a place where we can regroup. You two need to stay hidden until we're ready to make our next move." Sam didn't like the idea of splitting up, but he understood. They couldn't afford to draw too much attention. What now? Sam asked, his eyes on Ayana. Caleb glanced at Ayana, his expression softening. You need to stay out of sight. We can't risk putting you in the open. Ayana didn't argue. She knew the stakes were high. They had all made it this far, but they couldn't afford to make a mistake now. As Caleb began to turn away, Sam felt a sense of finality. We'll be ready, Sam said. Caleb gave a brief nod before disappearing into the trees. Sam and Ayana were left standing in the clearing, the weight of their task heavy on their shoulders. The sun was fully risen now, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Ayana looked at Sam, her expression hard but resolute. We've come this far, she said quietly. We can't stop now. Sam nodded, his heart racing with the knowledge that they were on the brink of something much bigger than they had ever imagined. No turning back, he muttered. Ayana gave him a small, determined smile. We'll finish this. As they disappeared into the trees, the forest seemed to close in around them, hiding them from the eyes that were surely searching. They had done what they came to do, but now the true fight was about to begin. They were going to take down the chief, and they were going to do it together. But they knew the road ahead would be long and treacherous. The battle for their freedom was only just beginning.